Good morning. This is going to be part two of the lunar month from February 17th through March 18th. A very, very intense and momentous month. So, in part two, we're going to cover the transits for America and for Donald Trump. And so let me share my screen and we can begin. This will take just a moment. I've got to get rid of a few panels so I can see what I'm doing. We're almost there. Okay, I think we're ready. The lunar month for the world, America, and Trump, February 17th through March 18th, part two. Hope you enjoyed part one. And we'll look at America. And the chart I usually use for America is this July 2nd, 1776 chart for the actual passage of the Declaration of Independence by the Continental Congress. On July 4th, they went public with this declaration. They printed it up and distributed it. And that is why we celebrate July 4th as Independence Day. However, let me point out that I think this July 2nd chart and the Sibley July 4th chart and some other charts are also important charts to study because the creation of America was not something that just happened in a day at a single point in time. It was an ongoing process. Now, because news of this declaration went public on July 4th, I see the July 4th chart as representing more America's persona, the way we like to see ourselves, and the way we like others to see ourselves. The main difference between the two charts, aside from different house cusps, is that the July 2nd chart has Moon in Capricorn, whereas the July 4th chart has Moon in Aquarius. And we certainly like to see ourselves, we like to see America as a leader in technology, exporting freedom and democracy around the world, engaging in charity and humanitarian events. And that is all true. We do a lot of that. But Moon in Capricorn perhaps represents more who we are on the inside. Moon in Capricorn wants to be more controlling of things, people, and situations. And we have a long and shameful history of slavery in America, enslaving people from Africa. We have a history of genocide against the indigenous population, Native Americans. We have targeted other groups throughout our history. Right now, Hispanics are being targeted. And we have a long history of trying to control other countries. In the past, we exercised more hard control, removing leaders of governments, using military to make countries do what we want to do. And it seems like Trump has recently been going back to that kind of hard control. For several decades, though, we exercised soft control through our economic power. We economically and through negotiations, we either convinced or coerced other companies into following our lead and doing what we want to do, making them do what we want. So, I think both charts and other charts too are relevant for America, but I have a slight preference for this July 2nd, 1776 chart, and this is the one I'll be using in this presentation. Now, whether you use a July 2nd or July 4th chart, in both of them, progressed Sun is going to be square Mars this year. And that increases the likelihood of aggressive or militaristic activity this year. And we have already seen an invasion of Venezuela to remove Maduro. And right now, there's a lot of saber rattling with respect to Iran. Ships are being positioned in the seas near that country. Threats are being made, and it remains to be seen if we take military action against Iran or not. For the July 2nd chart, this square between progressed Sun and Mars will culminate on November 12th, and that is not long after the midterm elections. So this chart suggests that there could be some violence or aggression surrounding those elections or the outcome of those elections. As I say, whether you use the July 2nd chart or any of the July 4th, 1776 charts for America, progressed Sun square natal Mars is still going to be very strong all year long in those charts. Now, if we look at the transits to America this month, you can see there's a lot of red bars in this diagram. That indicates a lot of tensions for America this month. And one of the main tensions is that we have transiting lunar nodal axis making a square to natal Uranus. That was strong before this month. It'll be strong after this month. It's strong the entire month. In the next lunar month, it becomes exact on March 22nd. So this is stirring up revolutionary feelings in people. This is stirring up a sense of patterns breaking, things breaking down. And to some, it's a question of, are we becoming engaged in a second American Civil War or a second American Revolution, or both? I don't think there's much of a difference between the two. Now, this month, we also have, for at least the first 3 weeks, transiting Neptune making a square to natal Venus. And for the first part of this lunar month, transiting Saturn will also be making that square to natal Venus. Venus is in Cancer, and Venus has a lot to do with our values. And in America, we say people have strong family values, and we want to be safe and secure in our own homes. But Saturn and Neptune are now conjunct in Aries, which is much more aggressive and militaristic. And this represents structures and philosophies of the powers that be, heavy-handed control tactics of the government, which are not sitting well with the values of American people. And I should note, I've said this several times, the last time that Neptune was in the first degree of Aries was the morning after the start of the American Civil War. And back then, it also made that square to natal Venus, and people's values were being challenged, and the North and the South went to war as a result of that. Now, this month, we also have transiting Chiron making a semi-square to natal Uranus for more than half of the month, becomes exact on February 23rd, and that is exacerbating the revolutionary tendencies that people are feeling now. Many people want to revolt against the things that our government is currently doing. Let's see, for most of the lunar month, we'll have transiting Jupiter, square natal Saturn, and this can mean several things. On the one hand, it's a disconnect between growth and regulation in this country. And Trump, I believe, recently has eliminated several more regulations, particularly with respect to the environment. He threw out a lot of stuff on climate change just the other day. again declaring it to be a hoax. Transiting Jupiter square natal Saturn can also represent uh, a disconnect or tension between progressives and conservatives. And additionally, Jupiter is in the 10th house, and Saturn is in the first house in this July 2nd chart that I'm using for America. Transiting Jupiter is going through the 10th house. So this can also be a tension or disconnect between expansive actions that the executive branch or Trump are taking, expanding their power, versus the rule of law and order, law and justice that we want in America, which relates to Saturn in Libra. So that's going to be an ongoing tension this month. We also have Pluto making a sesquiquadrant with Mars for most of the lunar month. That is going to exacerbate feelings of aggression. Mars, natal Mars, is in Gemini, so hopefully it is only verbal aggression, but there could be a greater tendency toward violence or also accidents or natural disasters. And then we have transiting Chiron coming into a square relationship with both Mercury and the Moon. That happens soon after we get into March. And this can affect a variety of things. It can cause wounding to a variety of things. It can cause wounding to commerce and the economy, things ruled by Mercury. It can wound our relationships with our allies, since Mercury is also ruler of the 9th house in the July 2nd chart I'm using. It could wound the presidency a bit because, let's see, we have Mercury in the 10th house here, referring to status of the president and the executive branch. It could also cause some hidden things coming to light because Mercury is also the ruler of the 12th house in this chart. So scandals, secrets that have been hidden, those could be revealed at this time. For instance, look at what's happening with the Epstein files. Now, squaring the moon, the people could be wounded. They could feel wounded in their homes, but the moon is in Capricorn. And let's see, that is going to be ruled by Saturn. So again, that takes us back to the Saturn in the first house thing. So both the people in the executive branch, the economy, relations with other countries, trade agreements, all of those things could be wounded more and more as we move into March. And those aspects will culminate shortly after the start of the next lunar month. But then we also have Pluto moving into a conjunction with the South Node, which puts it opposite the North Node. This conjunction of transiting Pluto with the natal South Node, it's not going to get exact this year. It will get exact in 2027. But historically, every time transiting Pluto has made a hard aspect to America's lunar nodal axis, there has been some social unrest, some trouble, some conflict. And we will begin to get into that starting into the second week of March. Okay, now about the only good thing going on is this trine between transiting Uranus and natal Pluto. Now, Pluto represents a country's power, but in America, in the Constitution, the power is vested in the people. If you go back here to this July 2nd chart, you can see Pluto is in the 4th house, so this has to do with the people. And a trine from transiting Uranus to natal Pluto, that could empower the people and help them revolt in a positive, well-coordinated way. Pluto could also represent the country's power, the executive branch's power, Trump's power, so he might get some benefit from this also. But I suspect the majority of the influence is going to go to returning power to the people. And let us hope so. Okay, here you can look at just the day-to-day transits to the USA chart. Most of these are going to be interplanet transits, which move very quickly, but you can just glance at this on your own and see which days look favorable, which days look less favorable for America. For instance, sometimes we have a few days of squares like Mars square Uranus on March 13th and square Sun on the 15th. Those could be days of tension for America, but they are followed by days of trines and sextiles from March 15th through the 17th. So those last few days of the lunar month will probably be a little bit more pleasant for America. Okay, let's look at how the new moon is going to impact America. And again, this new moon is a solar eclipse, so it's going to be more intense than usual. And as I've mentioned, we have the lunar nodal axis square natal Uranus, but also Venus will be part of that square. And this suggests that people's values are going to be leading them to revolt in one way or another. And natal Uranus is in Gemini, so this could be primarily verbal protests. But things are happening, they're contrary to people's values, they're getting stirred up, they're revolting. And transiting Neptune and Saturn are right over here, making a strong square to natal Venus. And again, the control measures, the philosophies, the aggressive actions of the current administration are not sitting well with the values of most American people. And transiting Chiron is making a semi-square to natal Uranus. That is adding fuel to the fire, exacerbating the revolutionary feelings that people are having right now. On the other hand, we have transiting Mars, making a trine to natal Mars, and a sextile to natal Chiron, and transiting Mars, natal Chiron, they are completing a minor or mini grand trine at this point, where we have a trine, sextile relationship. That is going to make taking action a little easier, and hopefully it will be more healing rather than harmful. We'll get hopefully more of the positive aspects or side of Chiron. And with with Mars and Gemini again, maybe we will get strong voices emerging that will fight the good fight in a good way, get us into good trouble, as John Lewis used to say, and help bring some healing to the country. And we also have transiting Uranus, trinatal Pluto, that could benefit the executive branch, the country's power. But I think it is more likely that it will be the power of the people that raises its voice. The Constitution puts the power in the people's hands rather than the executive branch's hands. We don't have a king. We don't have a dictator for life, allegedly, hopefully. And Pluto is in the fourth house, which has to do with the homeland and the home, the people. So I think the revolutionary voices of the people are going to be empowered by this kind of aspect. And remember, back in the second half of the 1960s, there was a conjunction between transing Uranus and transing Pluto, which brought in that whole social revolution of the second half of the 60s. Later this year, I think on July 17th, we have the first exact trine between transing Uranus and transing Pluto. And so we'll probably see some of the better things of the 60s coming back. We'll see people raising their voices, protesting, and wanting change again. And having transing Uranus ahead of time, trine natal Pluto in both July 2nd, July 4th charts, I think this is going to cause some foreshadowing of what we will see globally this summer when transing Uranus and transing Pluto make their first waxing trine. Okay. Now, on February 20th, we have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Of course, Saturn and Neptune make that square to natal Venus, which is exact to the degree. We've talked about that. We've talked about the lunar nodal axis squaring natal Uranus, stirring up these revolutionary feelings. We've talked about transiting Jupiter, square natal Saturn. That's both a disconnect between progressives and conservatives. It also represents the executive branch taking over the top actions which challenge our sense of the structure of law and justice. And this could also represent deregulation. It's a disconnect between growth and regulation, with the executive branch signing executive orders to do away, in its view, with more and more regulation. Now, we also, on this day, we're going to have Mercury making a square to Mars. We have transiting Mars making a sesquiquadrant with the natal ascendant. And we have transiting Mars making a quincunx to natal Neptune. All of these things could result in more aggression, either within or without the country during this lunar month. There is a heightened risk of conflict. People may be having to adjust some of their beliefs or philosophies based upon actions they see being taken. And I've mentioned this before, but it looks like Trump is positioning himself for war against Iran, though it may simply be a show of force that is taking place. So hopefully we can avoid a war that might be disastrous, more disastrous for people than helpful for people. But we'll just have to wait and see what plays out. And we also have transing Uranus, still trying natal Pluto, so this is hopefully empowering the people as they seek some sort of revolution and to make their voices heard. Now, there are going to be a lot of these aspects that continue throughout the month. And at the first quarter moon on February 24th, we still have Saturn, Neptune, square natal Venus. We still have Pluto coming into conjunction with the lunar nodal axis, the south node in particular. We still have transing lunar nodal axis, square natal Uranus. We still have Jupiter square Saturn, Pluto, sesquiquadrant Mars, and transing Uranus, trinatal Pluto. So you can see all the things that these aspects represent that we've already talked about. They're going to be continuing for a while here. When we get to the full moon is going to be a lunar eclipse. And as I've said before, particularly in part one of these videos for the lunar month, this is a very intense month. The new moon that begins with is a solar eclipse. The full moon is a lunar eclipse. We have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And lots of things are going to be poked at and stimulated throughout this lunar month. So, at the lunar eclipse, we still have Neptune making a square to natal Venus. Pluto still conjunct the lunar nodal axis. The transing lunar nodal axis still square natal Uranus. Now we have Chiron moving into a square relationship with natal Mercury that can wound American commerce, trade, the economy. It can wound the executive branch and the president. It can wound relations with other countries, trade with other countries, since Mercury rules the ninth house. And since Mercury rules the 12th house, hidden things, particularly perhaps about the Epstein files, might come to light and wound the executive branch and the president. We still have Pluto making a sesquiquadrant to natal Mars, increasing the likelihood of aggressive actions at home or abroad. We still have transing Uranus, trining natal Pluto, returning more power to the people as they engage in revolutionary activities and protest actions the government is taking. We also have transiting Mars making a trine to natal Venus. This suggests at this point people want to experience some sort of physical pleasure. This could be taking place in terms of romance. It could have to do with travel, taking trips. It could have to do with engaging in or attending sporting events. But people will be seeking some sort of physical, pleasurable release around this time of the lunar month. Okay, when we get to the third quarter moon, we still have Pluto conjunct the south node, transing lunar nodal axis, still square natal Uranus. Saturn and Neptune are both moving away from that square with natal Venus. But transing Chiron is now making a square to both Mercury and the moon, so both trade, commerce, the people, relations with other countries, hidden things coming to light, the executive branch. All of these things are likely to be wounded around this time. And transing Jupiter, still square natal Saturn. We have that throughout, so still that divide between conservatives, or progressives and conservatives, between the executive branch and the country, between over-the-top actions by Trump and the rule of law and order. We have transing Sun coming into opposition to natal natal Neptune. This is going to be in effect only for like maybe 3 days, day before, at the time of the third quarter moon, day after. That is throwing light on people's beliefs. This might also, since Neptune is in the 12th house, this might be throwing the light on some hidden scandals, again, taking us back to the Epstein files, or it may be something else that is brought into the light. And we still have transing Pluto making that sesquiquadrant to natal Mars, making aggressive actions more likely, but we still have transing Uranus trine natal Pluto, and that is hopefully returning more revolutionary power to the people, making it easier for people power to transform this country once again. Now, when we get to the next new moon on March 18th, transing lunar nodal axis is now joined by Mercury, making a square to natal Uranus, so people will probably raise their voices in protest even more. Transing Chiron is still square natal moon and Mercury. Transing Pluto is still conjunct the lunar nodal axis. Transing Jupiter is still square natal Saturn. Transing Pluto is still making the sesquiquadrate to natal Mars. And transing Uranus is still trine natal Pluto. So you get a sense of the themes that are going to be continuing throughout this entire lunar month. And to summarize, the month for America, with progressed Sun square natal Mars all year long using the July 2nd, 1776 chart for America, it is expected that America's aggressive tendencies will be unleashed this year both at home and abroad. Also, this square will become exact in November, shortly after the midterm elections. There's a heightened risk of violence around that time. With the lunar nodal axis squaring natal Uranus throughout the lunar month, people are going to be feeling quite revolutionary. A lot of people are going to be revolting. And I believe at the end of March, we have another No Kings protest scheduled. That'll be in the next lunar month, though. And with Saturn Neptune squaring natal Venus, people will be facing new philosophies and ideologies that conflict with their values. Also, there's an increased potential for aggression or violence this month, and people may be wounded both physically and economically. But a trine from Uranus to Pluto, however, could result in opening of people's minds, organized protests, and efforts to return power to the people. All right, now let's take a look at Trump. There is his natal chart. He's got Sun, North Node, Uranus, all in the 10th house. They're conjunct with one another, and he has an insatiable thirst for power. He also has Saturn and Venus conjunct in the 11th house. He collaborates with others, particularly other strong men, to make himself feel more secure. Venus rules his 10th house, so he uses these strong men to enhance his own status. And anything affecting Saturn tends to affect Venus or his status also. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. Okay, this lunar month he has a fair number of tensions. Chiron square Saturn, transing lunar nodes, making a semi-square sesquiquadrate to Saturn. Uranus square Mars conjunct the midheaven. Jupiter square Chiron. Jupiter semi-square the ascendant. And right at the tail end of the lunar month, we have Chiron making a square to natal Venus. We do have the transing lunar nodal axis making a trine to its Mercury. That has been ongoing and will continue after this lunar month, coming exact on the 21st, and that is enhancing his ability to communicate. You may not like what he is communicating, but he has been very effective at communicating. At the very start of this lunar month, transing Chiron will still be making a sextile to a sun, bringing him a lifeline, some healing, but that pretty much fades away after the first day. Okay, and that's taken over by transing Chiron square Saturn, which will probably wound Trump significantly in some ways. It might be Epstein files or something else. That's in effect for most of the lunar month, and I expect it will affect his status and reputation. But Saturn, if we go back here, Saturn rules the 6th house of health, so there is a greater potential for some health problems at this point. And with the transiting lunar nodal axis making a semi-square and sesquiquadrate to Saturn, that is going to exacerbate things. We're on the tail end now of transiting Uranus square his natal Mars and conjunct his midheaven. The conjunction to the midheaven endures for a while, but it's kind of weak, but we may start to see some of his chaotic behaviors and angry outbursts simmer down for a little while. Let's hope so, but there's still going to be an effect, so things can still happen. We do have Jupiter, transiting Jupiter, coming into a square with this natal Chiron, also making a semi-square to his ascendant. And Chiron is in his second house, which has to do with money, finances. A more deeper level, it's the resources we need to survive. And with Jupiter making a square to natal Chiron, I'm anticipating some sort of wounding, either wounding to his finances or wounding with regard to what he needs to survive. I am expecting some sort of wounding to take place, and the question really is, will we hear about it publicly? Or would it just be covered up? At the very end, transiting Chiron moves into a square with Venus, and Venus rules his 10th house, so we'll start to see his reputation being wounded in some way, his status wounded. But once we get into March, we begin to see transiting Pluto making a trine to his natal Neptune, which is in the second house. This could add to his allure, his personal magnetism. It could also result in something happening which will enhance his finances one way or another. I'm not sure if I can get more specific than that. Transiting Pluto. Let's see, it's going to be in his sixth house of health and employment. So it'll be interesting to see what develops regarding his health or his financial status once we get into March. Now I also have the day-by-day transits for Donald Trump, and it looks like most, if not all of these, are just fast-moving personal planets, so they're not going to last much longer than a day, but you can look and see when they become exact. And when you have hard aspects like you do from, let's see, March 10th through March 13th, that could be a string of difficult days for Trump. When you have more harmonious aspects, as we do March 14th through the 17th, those could be better days for Trump. Okay, if we look at the full moon, which is a solar eclipse on February 17th, the sun and the moon are going to be opposite his ascendant and Mars. So he will probably be angry at this point. And sun and moon are close to his descendant, so it may be the voices of other people that are making him angry. And transiting Uranus is going to be making a square to natal Saturn. It's essentially completing a T-square between natal Mars, not natal Saturn. It's completing a T-square between natal Mars, transiting Sun and Moon, and transiting Uranus. So remember that the new moon, in this case a solar eclipse, it sets the tone for the entire month. Some things make it better, some things make it worse. But this tension that is present and this chaos that is going to be present is there. Sometimes on the surface, sometimes below the surface, but there for the entire lunar month. And then he has transient Chiron square natal Saturn that we've talked about that will probably wound his reputation, his status a bit, and maybe also his health. And the transient lunar nodal axis is semi-square and sesquiquadrate to natal Saturn, so that just exacerbates things. On the first day, he still has transient Chiron sextile his natal sun, but that goes away quickly. But at the start, that throws him a lifeline and helps bring some healing to him. And he also has transient lunar nodal axis, making a sextile and a trine to natal Mercury throughout the entire month. So his ability to communicate will probably not be impaired. It will probably be enhanced in this lunar month. At the time of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, I'm using Campanus houses, and in this chart, that conjunction takes place on the cusp of his 8th house of death and transformation. If you look at all the other major house systems, the conjunction of Saturn-Neptune will be either on the cusp or else firmly situated in the 8th house. So this raises some possibilities. Is Trump going to die in this coming year? Possibly so. Perhaps a more likely outcome is going to be that the collective voice of the people, the philosophy of the people, will force Trump to change some of his particular stances. Now we've got transient Chiron still square natal Saturn, which will probably impact his status and maybe his health. Still have transient Uranus square natal Mars. He's very impulsive, very chaotic, very angry. Transiting Jupiter square natal Chiron. Expect some wounding here as a result of over-the-top actions that he takes. Transiting Mercury square the natal lunar nodal axis. Now we can contrast that with the transiting lunar nodal axis, making a sextile and trine to his natal Mercury. So one is going to intensify communication in a good way, the other in a bad way. So they'll probably meet somewhere in the middle. But the favorable aspect from the lunar nodes to Mercury, that's going to last the entire month. The unfavorable aspects from Mercury to the lunar nodes, that just lasts a few days. So a tone is being set for the entire lunar month. He also has transient lunar nodal axis semi-square sesquiquadrate Saturn. That's going to add to the impact of transient Chiron square Saturn. Could affect his status or health. But he has transiting Mars, making a strong trine to his natal Saturn, and that will definitely strengthen his constitution. Now, at the first quarter moon, we see a lot of these aspects still there, a few new ones. We still have transient Chiron square natal Saturn, transient Uranus square natal Mars, transient Jupiter square natal Chiron. New, however, is transiting Mars opposite natal Mars, so he's going to be probably pretty angry on this day and the following day. We have transient Mars square natal midheaven, so there is a T-square being formed between the transient and the natal planets. And so he could be taking executive actions as a result of his anger. We have transient Venus square his natal Uranus. And let's see. What else do we have here? This could kind of play in with transing Uranus square natal Mars, he's going to be a little bit more chaotic. He's going to be making decisions at this point in time based on his right brain or gut feeling, as he calls it. And the consequences are not necessarily going to be good. Okay, we've covered the rest of it. As you can see, many of these things are ongoing. When we get to the full moon, that's going to be a lunar eclipse. Still have transing Chiron, square natal Chiron, transing Jupiter, square natal, transing Chiron, square natal Saturn, transing Jupiter, square natal Chiron, transiting Mars, opposite natal ascendant, transing lunar nodal axis, semi-square sesquiquadrate natal Chiron, but making a trine and sextile to natal Mercury, and transing Pluto, trine natal Neptune. This is where that trine from Pluto to Neptune begins to take effect in the last half of this lunar month. That may enhance his charisma and his financial status. We're still wondering how Saturn Neptune up in the 8th house will affect his longevity, but we can only wait and see. Again, you see there's a lot of stuff that just simply continues throughout the lunar month. When we get to the third quarter moon, what's continuing? We have transing Chiron, still square natal Saturn, transing Jupiter, still square natal Chiron. Now we have Sun and the Moon square the lunar nodal axis, and let's see, something's going to be conjunct the moon. Let's see, how's it? We have the moon is conjunct the moon and the lunar nodal axis. We have the sun squaring those. So transiting sun and moon and natal lunar nodal axis and moon, they're forming a T-square. So things will feel intense. Personally, feel very intense for Donald Trump at this point in time when we get to the third quarter moon. The transing lunar nodal axis is still making the semi-square sesquiquadrate to natal Saturn, and the trine and sextile to natal Mercury, and Pluto trine natal Neptune. That is still continuing. But he's still getting wounding to his reputation, his status at this point. He'll have some kind of personal wounding, and this third quarter moon is going to be particularly intense for him. And this takes us to the new moon on March 18th, where the square from transing Chiron now moves from Saturn to Venus as its focal point. And he's not being thrown the usual lifelines he gets. We still have transing Jupiter square Chiron. Transiting Venus is now in opposition to natal Chiron. So yes, I'm expecting some kind of wounding. Financial or otherwise. Remember the second house, I think particularly in Vedic astrology, it has an association with death too, because second house has to do with the resources we need to survive. If we don't get those resources, we die. And the rest of it, he still has transing lunar nodal axis, making the semi-square and sesquiquadrate to natal Saturn, but the trine and sextile to natal Mercury. So his reputation, status is still being impacted. He's still a great communicator. And with Pluto trine natal Neptune, something will go right for him. He might become even richer. He made over $1 billion in his first term. Interesting. No protests from the Republicans on that. Not protesting like they were protesting Hunter Biden, but it is what it is, and we'll see what happens. So, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that just simply continues throughout the month. And to sum it all up, with transiting Chiron square natal Saturn and transiting Jupiter square natal Chiron, Trump is likely to experience some sort of wounding to either his approval rating, health, finances, or control over others. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction takes place on the cusp of his 8th house, and given his age, the likelihood of death or other type of transformation this year also increases. However, a grab for other people's resources may be even more likely. He may have to bend to the collective will of other people's values too, as a result of that Saturn-Neptune in the 8th house. And let's see, transits to and from Mars in the first half of the lunar month will likely increase his anger and his actions. Also, transiting Uranus square natal Mars will continue to make his actions chaotic in the first half of the lunar month. The trine from transiting Pluto to his natal second house Neptune that occurs towards the end of the lunar month could result in spontaneous enlightenment. I doubt it, though. It's far more likely that he will hatch some new scheme to make himself both richer and more powerful. And his charisma will also benefit. And I believe that is the end of this presentation, part 2 of the lunar month. So here I am again. I'm back. I hope you watched part 1 and enjoyed that. I hope you have now completed watching part 2 and you've enjoyed it and found it informative. And for both America and the world, and probably Russia also, this lunar month is going to be very intense. I don't usually talk about Russia in these lunar month overviews because I live in America and Russia's a closed society. We don't get a lot of news readily from them. But as I've also pointed out, Russia has a long history of being strongly impacted by Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. Recent news articles suggest that the Russian economy is about to collapse. It might take Putin with it. And there are some difficult transits coming up for Russia. I believe starting in March, transiting Pluto will be conjunct natal Saturn for several months, for about 5 months. In the 1991 chart for the Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And it has some rough transits ahead for the next few years. America has some rough transits ahead for the next few years. So we live in interesting times. And we will see what happens with both countries. But for now, I hope you found this interesting and informative. I hope you join me again for future videos. And I'll just say now, so long and be well.